the Agorist Nexus podcast. I'm Brandon. I've got my great co-host Dag with me. How you doing, Dag?
I'm doing fantastic, man. How you doing?
I'm good. We got a very special guest today. This is the first guest that we've had on 2 different times, but I wanted to have him on again. His name's Decentralizd, of course. I wanted to have him on again to talk about the Bitcoin Cash, the possible, probably Bitcoin Cash fork coming up in November, because the IFP, the Infrastructure Funding Program, it's kind of a governance argument, and in terms of governance, Decentralizd is probably one of the best people to talk to because he's been behind the scenes in, I think, 4 different governance coins, and also his coin Dvault is a fork from, or has the same code base as Bitcoin Cash. So if anybody knows the technology behind Bitcoin Cash, it's also decentralized too. So and with his crypto knowledge, it's I just thought it was imperative to have him on. So without further ado, how you doing, Decentralizd?
I'm doing all right. How about you guys?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. So I first want to start out with, what is IFP, the Infrastructure Funding Program? What are the details behind it? And then I want to go through who's on which side of this thing, the big players.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to get started, I guess, I've been following this since the beginning, since way before last month. Before that, there was a couple months ago, they started this talk about this thing. It kind of died out for a little while, and then it came back up out of nowhere. And now they're just trying to ram it in the code base, essentially, without getting a lot of discussion behind it. But basically, the IFP is the Infrastructure Funding Protocol, program, whatever you want to call it. And it's basically just a way to give block rewards to the Bitcoin ABC team at the end of the day, with all things considered and the simplifications avoided. That's the point of it, is just to give. So basically, it's a way to fund the Bitcoin ABC team, right? And that's their model. I think initially the argument that I remember reading about when it was happening on the internet and on Twitter and whatever, that everyone was talking about, was that there was a push from China. There were investors in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem that needed a funding protocol in place that go forward with more donations down the road, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, they have a million different reasons for why they need a funding mechanism, and I could see that argument. Don't get me wrong. I'm not here to say Bitcoin Cash doesn't need a funding protocol. That's not my point. But I don't think this is the way to do it. And the way that they're doing it, just so everyone knows, is they're basically trying to say, hey, we need 8% of the blocks, and we need them to go to a foundation, and that foundation will have some sort of a voting board. That's about all we know. And the coins will be managed by that foundation. And if anybody's been in crypto for a while, they know how foundations usually end up. A lot of drama, the Tezos Foundation, the early Bitcoin Foundation, etc. It's always just a bunch of drama. And those are centralized entities. And I think we can do better in this space. It's kind of just the high level, obvious call out is that we can do better. There's a lot of crypto projects in the space doing similar things. And for a Bitcoin Cash, or I guess more specifically the Bitcoin ABC team, to come out swinging with this and act like it's just the top notch, innovative funding model that you could possibly have, is just asinine, in my opinion. But essentially, that's kind of the summary of what we could go into.
Yeah.
So let's say.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if there was any chance, in case people aren't exactly familiar with something like this, maybe what kind of just a real brief, like what is a fork? How does something like this come about? And we're going to talk about the possible implications and everything, but what is a fork?
Yeah, so basically, fork's going to be a code-based adjustment that people don't agree upon at the end of the day. So let's say there's a code, Coin A. Coin A is putting out a GitHub link, and it's going to put out a certain code base. At any point in the future, if the developers add any code that some of the users or most of the users, or honestly any amount of the users, technically anybody can fork that code base, which means that they can duplicate it, put it on their own GitHub repo or whatever other service that's kind of like GitHub. And then now you have 2 different versions of that, technically that blockchain, that could run side by side. And then the rest of it's up to whether or not people support, install, and run those servers, because if there's no servers, there's no blockchain, right? So if people support that code base, they install let's say, call it Coin B now, on their node instead of Coin A, then that's going to be they're going to live together for the most part at the first, until they start replaying each other and having sort of technical issues going on by having that system play, and then one of them is going to win out and become a longer version of the blockchain, and then the other one's going to cease to be adopted. That's generally how a fork operates. But there's obviously other ways that can play out, but I mean that's just the theme of how a fork acts.
So what happens to the so let's say you have I don't exactly own the coin, but the keys. But at any rate, you have some of this, coin A or whatever. And like, so when they first fork, it does not like coin B just become something else with a new name. You're saying they basically occupy the same space. So then what happens? Let's say B wins out. If I, had it before when it was just A, do I still have coin, or does it?
So it depends on the timeline that you're trying to move those coins in. I think right at the very start, when both nodes pop up, like for example in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem right now, there's BCHN, there's Bitcoin Unlimited, and there's Bitcoin Cash. As long as those the code bases are very similar, that they can stay on the same blockchain together. But the moment something starts becoming consensus breaking, that some of the nodes don't agree on the code that's being passed among each other, then that one node or some of those nodes are going to start going on to a new chain. Basically, a whole new blockchain is going to be created at that moment, and at that moment you'll have two versions of one coin. Now if you can sell both of those is a whole different story, because it depends on exchanges and whether they can be adopted and whether it's going to even last past a day or a week or a month. Some forks die overnight. A lot of proof of stake coins are always forking constantly and adjusting their forks, and like in those moments, if an exchange were to adopt that secondary version of the code base, yeah, usually you could sell something like that. But when people think forks most of the time, they usually just think, is the code base that I'm using a singular entity, or is it multiple entities now? So like for Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, when they forked, there initially was just Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden there was Bitcoin Cash and there was Bitcoin. And so I think that's some long-term vision of what could happen here. Like Bitcoin Cash could have another altcoin pop out of it, or very well the IFP could just die out and everyone stays in one community.
So who are the big players behind the IFP split and the people who are not, the people who don't want it?
Okay, so from my understanding, and again, like I spend most of my time working about Dvault and focused on things that we're worried about. But being that we did fork the Bitcoin Cash code base, and we're not, some of us on the Dvault team aren't super big fans of the way of like the way ABC does their stuff on the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. So like Amari is a little bit too much of a dictator in my opinion, but essentially it's Amari, it's Bitcoin ABC. Amari, if people don't know that are listening, he's the lead developer of Bitcoin ABC. So basically he's one of the guys that spearheaded Bitcoin Cash from the beginning. If not one of the main guys. So people give him a lot of credit for that. But recently, he's had a lot of backing from people that are just trying to sort of fund their projects. And I totally get what they're doing. So we don't have to call people out necessarily on like who's supporting, who's not supporting. But essentially, there's two mindsets here. There's one mindset that says, hey, we can't fund Bitcoin Cash on donations. And I completely understand the sentiment. You cannot build a world-class cash system with just people donating their money. The world is not that great of a place. So there needs to be some form of funding. I get it. But the people backing this have a financial incentive for this to become the standard, for the 8% of these coins to get diverted to a foundation that they may or may not have influence over, that they may or may not be able to use those coins to help their own businesses. I think that's one thing that needs to be pointed out. Also, a lot of these companies that are backing this are using this logic that like without this, Bitcoin Cash will die. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's a whole other conversation. But I think that is not a good enough argument to say we need to adjust the consensus of Bitcoin Cash, and especially we didn't even get into this without majority hash power. Being that Bitcoin is the white paper, everything says Bitcoin is hash power related. So being that is the standard, going in and changing that later on and saying like, hey, we're going to just force this into the code base, even if the hash power is not there, and if we're going to say, hey, you can turn it on if you want to, you can not turn it on if you don't want to, and then they're going to slowly slip it in there. And it's just like, you got to have a standard, you got to have a voting mechanism, you got to have some form of like thing that everyone could point out to and be like, this is the result. So I don't think that this system is going to play out like that. Like they're just going to push this in. They're going to maybe get some people donating 8% of the blocks, but what are they going to do? Start orphaning the other blocks and do all this other crazy stuff? So now you're getting to this point where it's like, I don't know. Who matter? The point is, I get your question. Who backs this? It doesn't matter who backs this, in my opinion. I think it matters about why would you allow it to be done this way, right? If you back it, I would say I back a funding mechanism, but I don't back the way that this funding mechanism is trying to be installed. So that's a reason I don't really want to call people out, because I get it. I get what they're getting at. But there's many companies. You guys can look it up. Just basically go look up BCH, Split, anything like that. You'll see a larger list of people arguing about it. They're pretty vocal about who's backing it. But just to simplify it for everybody, there's businesses and there's a lot of supposed Chinese hash power versus people that want Bitcoin Cash to remain free market, and those people have spawned a alternative node implementation called BCHN. So those are the two parties that are arguing over this at the end of the day. But I mean, we don't need to call names. We don't need to say so and so's wrong, so and so's stupid, because everyone understands the world just a little bit differently, in my opinion. So some of these people could be very well correct in their reasoning for wanting this, right? But at the same time, they need to listen to the other side, and the other side is generally saying we can't do it this way, and I think that's a fair argument.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a big indicator of well, first of all, I agree with you. I don't like how the fork is. I don't like I believe that it needs funding, but I don't like how they're going about it myself. But I think a big thing for me is Bitcoin.com and Roger Ver, they donated $200 million to a fund that's going towards Bitcoin Cash development. So, and as to my knowledge, I don't think that they're for the IFP. So it's kind of like, well, that's a lot of money
Right.
that's voluntarily going to Bitcoin Cash development, and I think them. What is it, like BCHN is what you said?
Yeah.
And Bitcoin Unlimited are not. They don't want the
Yeah, correct.
To
So
my
basically,
knowledge,
both of those implementations would prefer it to remain sort of vanilla without any funding built into the protocol. I think a lot of people that come from early Bitcoin can understand the sentiment that in diverting block rewards in general is just not very free market oriented, and I think a lot of people that got into Bitcoin very early understand the free market aspects of it. So I think they would like to preserve that as much as possible. And as soon as you start diverting block rewards, especially in a project that's been, and don't get me wrong, Dvault, we divert block rewards, but the thing is we started the coin with that in the writing. We didn't come in and strong arm anybody and force anybody to change their investment into a whole other format. We didn't do any of that. We just said, hey, this is what it is. Yeah, and I think that's key here. And so the fact that they don't if Amari and ABC was really gung ho at this was going to work, and they knew for a fact, then they would make an altcoin and prove it. You know what I mean? But the thing is those altcoins already exist. So they're trying to hold on to this market share that Bitcoin Cash has, and they're trying to turn it into their own altcoin as a team. ABC, the team that runs, and I don't think that's right to do for a Bitcoin fork. If you're gonna restart the Genesis block, go ahead, do whatever you want, make whatever rules you want. But if you're gonna clone everybody's money and then act like, oh, go over here to our version of Bitcoin, it's better, we'll help you out, just to turn around and do whatever you want, is kind of the point of getting away from banks. You know what I mean? People don't want anyone just to have the ability to do whatever they want with their money. So I think that's something that Amari doesn't understand or doesn't think is important. And if he did, then he would understand the rejection of this as a community as a whole. And I think he would find a better way to do it. And there's better ways to do it. And like you said, the $200 million, I would hesitate to say how successful that amount of money will be, especially because it's probably got a lot of things attached to it and how you're going to get it and when you're going to get it and all that kind of stuff. So it's probably not super simple. I think Amari and team probably just want some form of a slush fund, for lack of a better term, to be able to pull funding from for new staffing and not have to go through all the paperwork that is required when you kind of have a decentralized funding mechanism. And I think that's what people don't understand is that I think they know Like there's an option. The master nodes, like Dash does it, or we can do it like we do it, where you do the one coin, one vote, and then funding is diverted, and then we have multi-sigs and all that stuff. But they're not doing any of that. They're basically just saying we're going to have a multi-sig, and all the coins will end up there, 8% of the whole inflation of Bitcoin Cash going forward, and we'll manage it. Don't just trust us. And I think that's just backwards. Like we don't invest in this stuff like that. So why are you going to tell people Bitcoin Cash is something you've investment into, and Bitcoin Cash is the future of money, but just trust us? Like that's not what this was built on at all. That was one of the main pillars of Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash especially, was that you don't need to trust people. You need to trust the protocol.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I look at mining, and if I try to look at it from like a miner's perspective, it's like I think most of them, depending on their hardware, they can mine, BTC, BCH, BSV,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess it would be smart to mine the one that's most profitable, right? So
Right.
I think that when you have something like this, it kind of incentivizes them to mine other chains. So you have less security, less hash power. So what's your opinion on that?
So if we were to continue down this road of just talking strictly about ABC and Bitcoin Cash, I have one opinion, but ultimately, I think the war that Bitcoin Cash thinks it's fighting versus Bitcoin has come sort of to an end, and I think Bitcoin Cash needs to carve out its own lane. I think for better or for worse, Bitcoin is Bitcoin now, and we can all have our own definitions of Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, the Bitcoin that people are going to use is going to be the one that the exchanges call Bitcoin, and the one that Coinbase calls Bitcoin. And I believe Bitcoin Cash should probably just worry about its own stuff, which means it probably could just change its mining algorithm long term. And that might be beneficial to the whole ecosystem, to be honest. SHA is not any sort of holy grail of mining, security. As long as you're putting computers to work, I think at the end of the day, that's the name of the game. The more computers, the better, the more security you have. So GPU mining might be something useful down the road if that gets solved, where they stop creating ASICs every time. Even like a RandomX type thing might be useful long term. And this is some of the reasons that we're looking into these ideas in Dvault, is because we know what would be a version of Bitcoin Cash that I would prefer, that you would prefer. And I think that involves, what they're trying to do. They're trying to add a funding, but that's just the wrong way to do it. They need to add privacy. Well, that's coming slowly, piece by piece, I think. Schnorr, whatever else comes to Bitcoin, we can take that. They can take that. Taproot, all that kind of stuff. Whatever's available out there, I think Bitcoin Cash will adopt it. So the logic goes is like we're all trying to build some sort of futuristic payment system at the end of the day, and I think that hash power is not that important. It's a good voting mechanism because that's what we had, but there's better ways to do it. I'm not saying that Bitcoin Cash needs to jump off of hash power, but there just needs to be an obvious choice, right? Like the argument now with hash power is oh, China supports us. Don't worry, they'll turn the hash power on. It's like, well, the guys you're relying on to turn the hash power on are currently mining Bitcoin, so why do they matter, right? Like that's an argument. Another argument is if hash power matters so much, then why are the developers being able to put code in the data in the GitHub? Everyone downloads it, even though we're signaling against it. Stuff like that, right? So I think that hash power is not a very important argument in my opinion. I know a lot of people like to harp on, well, the miners, the free market, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, miners are just for-profit entities, and like you said earlier, they're going to mine the most profitable chain. So if you're competing for SHA, it's not necessarily governance at that point. You're just competing for who's mining the chain, and the governance aspect of SHA is going to get broken because there's so much more hash power sitting on Bitcoin that if you say, okay, let's signal for this hash power, let's signal for this Taproot upgrade, let's signal for this whatever upgrade, then all those people come over from Bitcoin and just vote no with their hash power for 2 weeks so that they can keep Bitcoin in a good, profitable, like technologically advanced state and keep Bitcoin Cash. Not, then long term you're going to have to change that to some other form of mining, right? Or that's some other form of voting or something along the way. So I get what Amari's trying to do. I get there's the logic here long term that they're going, but the way that they're going about it just reminds me of like a tone deaf politician almost, like where they just preach what they want and they don't listen to the people telling them how to do it the right way.
So So, any idea, like, do you think the miners are going to want to mine the IFP side?
So far, I think 50+% of hash is usually signaling for BCHN. And like I said, I been watching this since the beginning, so I have seen a lot more people that have been long-term Bitcoin cashers. Like I've been following Bitcoin Cash since basically before the fork. Basically, I'm as much as people want to hate on Roger, I'm a big Roger fan. I think the guy stands for his principles, and I think he doesn't care how many people hate on him, and you got to respect that, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
in the
I'm a
early
Bear
days,
fan too.
yeah, he was one of the early guys that got me hooked on Bitcoin. Like I was into Bitcoin, and then I started watching some of his content early on, and I was like, dude, this guy's he's got it figured out, and he simplified it for me, and he made me understand and care about Bitcoin. So I will forever appreciate the things I've learned from him. And when he stands up and says on his Twitter account, it looks like Bitcoin ABC is forking off. Like you gotta understand why he says that kind of stuff. And so I think the reason he says that kind of stuff is because most people are going to, he knows the community, what the vibes like in the community. He knows what people are saying. His advisors, his friends, everybody he knows in this ecosystem, his fellow whales, they all have opinions, right? I bet you he comes and collects the data before he forms them, because early on he was for the IFP. He assumed, oh, IFP, obviously, duh, we need this because he's a Dash investor. He's a Zcoin investor. He's another, he knows these things are successful tools. So it's not that he's against the IFP. It's not that he's against, it's that he's against the strong arming and the people that are going to, like, in one way they're standing up for their principles as well, but they're not listening. And so I think that's part of it as well, standing up for principles and being able to listen to people. I don't think Amari has that capability, but I think the people not necessarily on Roger's side of it, but on Bitcoin.com, on BCHN, those type of people have all come from a preservation mindset, while Amari is coming from a risk averse mindset where he's saying, look, I'm going to throw my hands in there if I don't get what I want, and I might just stop developing for Bitcoin Cash altogether. And it's like, so you basically are telling us that we have to pay you or you're going to quit. And how often have you told an employer you need a raise or you're going to quit and you didn't get fired, right? Or you didn't get told, okay, see you later. Like, that's just not the way the world works all the time. And as much as he wants to cry and kick about, oh, I don't want to feel like I'm the community's, like, welcome mat, you chose to be the lead developer of a community driven product. Like, you're going to have to do that. That is part of the role, man. And if you can't do that, hire someone to help you do it. And if you can't find someone to help you do it because no one likes your personality or you can't agree with anybody, then maybe you need to take some fucking time off or something, right? But I think that's kind of where it's going. I don't see the hash power signaling for very long for essentially a tax on themselves of 8%, especially a majority of them. Like do you see a large majority of hash just willingly wanting to give up 8% of its profit when they're already not very profitable? I don't know. That's for people to think. I don't know, But for me, my opinion is I don't think that's going to be something that's very largely popular among the profitable miners, because that's
Yeah,
all they really are.
I wouldn't want. If I was a miner, I wouldn't want to. But this brings up another question: is the IFP going to cause more drama?
Yeah,
like if they
100%.
start doing things with the funds that nobody likes.
That's the other thing. There's not a lot of oversight.
Then?
That's the problem. Look, so when we do tomorrow, we have to do some transactions for the Dvault, like multi-sigs. They're locked, there's coins locked in multi-sigs. So it takes 5 of us to unlock, or 4 of us out of 5 to unlock the coins on, and we pay people monthly that work on the project. Like, we don't just ask for volunteers all the time, right? So we have to pay them. How do we pay them? Coins are mined constantly into a multi-sig address. There's a super block, or I'm sorry, that coins are constantly mined into normal people's addresses. Every month there's a super block which prints a certain percentage of those coins that were mined previous month and puts them in a multi-sig address. Then we go on, 4 of us have to agree on a multi-sig address, like a transaction, basically. We all have to sign it. And then that payment goes out. We then have a transparency report that says, what that coin address was that we sent the coins to, how many coins there was, what day it was, how much the value was, that kind of stuff. And we say we label it. What was this for? Like, we are at 250,000 max on a good day right now, market cap coin, and we have these kind of standards. And you're telling me that a multi-billion-dollar project that's been around for many years and is very successful and has some of the best adoption in terms of, like, actual usage and shopping, and, like, you're gonna just not do any of that? You're gonna, like, what happens if Amari gets a gun pointed at his head? Or what happens, you know what I mean? Like, these things happen. So I just think it's ill-advised, it's short-sighted, it's all those things that you would just say, like, stop and think, why are we doing it this way? Like, why there's like, look, we can point at Dash. I personally think Dash has a lot of problems. Like, I've been very vocal about that for years, but they do it better than what they're proposing for this. So if that's going to be the case, then we're just going downhill. Future Bitcoin Cash future is going downhill, downhill, downhill. If this is the way we're going to implement changes, if this is the way we're going to go about strong arming and sock puppeting our way to the future, right? Like, that's just, I don't think that's the way it should be. I think there needs to be a better voting mechanism. And Bitcoin.com used to have the exact voting mechanism that we currently have using for one coin, one vote. We started it from Bitcoinocracy. That's the project. Like, if you go look up Bitcoinocracy, it's a GitHub link. You can go basically use Bitcoin voting, one coin, one vote. I think that would be a better way to signal for changes like this as compared to hash power. Because when you're talking about hash power, you're talking about who's got like the large players. What incentive do they have to participate in this change? That's it. That's the only answer you get. With one coin, one vote, at least you can say, while it's above this amount, I tend to vote for these things. While it's below this amount, you know what I mean? You can sort of divvy it up in terms of like incentive and where the interest lies for some of these changes. Right now with Bitcoin Cash, all you can really do is say, well, we'll find out when the hash power signals for it. And then we'll hope the developers listen. And the thing is when that fund is not managed by the community, they can't fire him. So what's to stop him from just, not necessarily he's a bad guy or nothing, but what's to stop him from not spending the money well? What's to stop him from doing something and changing the protocol with the money that people don't want to be changed, yet he's the funded one now, so there's no stopping him unless you're going to go sue him yourself, whatever, right? Well, that all spells a very bad picture for the price of Bitcoin Cash long term, because as soon as someone like Roger, as soon as someone like just any large whale decides to exit, that price is going to tank. I don't care how rich, I don't care how many billions of dollars you think are in Bitcoin Cash, one large whale from Bitcoin Cash will tank that entire market. So like, I don't know. It's very, very, very it's like walking on eggshells, for these people, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and it's very interesting. Like, we'll see what happens, I guess. So I'm guessing that you think that the Bitcoin Cash ticker, who do you think will win the Bitcoin Cash ticker? You think Bitcoin Unlimited and BCH will win, or do you think ABC will?
I think it's whoever has the whales backing them. So I think right now the whales are backing BCHN just as a don't piss us off to ABC. And then if ABC goes through with this and keeps trying to act the way they're acting, I'm sure that some of the whales are going to start checking them. Like I said, one of these whales on either side could cause a lot of price disruption. So it depends on, the risk tolerance of some of these people. So let's say Roger has a very low risk tolerance right now because he's bored of this drama. He's bored of crypto or something. He's not going to drop as much money as is needed to keep that bag of his very valuable right away. He's going to wait and cost average in over a period of time. And if it's him dumping, it's probably even worse, right? So I don't see him leaving Bitcoin Cash. I don't see Bitcoin Cash forking away from any vision that he doesn't approve of necessarily. Not to say he's the only guy that matters there, but he's the most vocal guy and he can influence most of the people, most of the exchanges. So that's, to me, key. I think that's what he didn't have access to during the Bitcoin, the big block, small block thing. I think if he would have had more access to like Kraken and stuff, I believe were not necessarily on his end for some of these things back in the day. A lot of companies like that kind of went against. But in Bitcoin Cash, he's kind of not necessarily seen as the king, but he's definitely a top dog over there. So when he starts saying things like, yeah, they're forking off, like I take that very, very, very literally. I don't see Roger forking off. Like, I don't see Bitcoin.com adopting the new Bitcoin ABC ticker for their, you know what I mean? And they're the number one wallet. So, nobody cares about what Binance does. I mean, that's just a trading platform. Nobody cares. It's about what wallets, where are people holding this? Like, where is the liquidity? And I think, Bitcoin Cash has kind of suffered this like ugly duckling thing for quite a while, that people kind of ignore it a little bit, and that's probably going to play to its advantage right now, because not a lot of people are going to try to jump in just to clutter the conversation like they have in the past. And yeah, I don't think it happens badly. I think at worst case scenario is Bitcoin ABC has a new altcoin to play with, and they still try to act like they're in Bitcoin Cash because they're not that stupid just to act like, Amari's the only reason Bitcoin Cash is successful. That's obvious. So if he starts a new coin, yeah, sure, it might be successful. It might be like Avalanche or something like that again, but it'll be nothing more than that. It won't be a Bitcoin Cash competitor. Like, that's for sure.
And I mean, would you say? I mean, I'm guessing that this split is somewhat significant because there is, we've got Bitcoin ABC versus, Bitcoin Unlimited. Those are like the two main Bitcoin Cash, dogs in the fight, and then you've also got Bitcoin.com on one side, and all these other players on the other.
What do you think? What do you think BSV is going to do during this? They still have a big incentive to mess with this.
Yeah, that's a good question too. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, let's look at the market caps real quick. Hold on before we start saying anything.
Yeah, let's see.
BSV is sitting down here at 11, and Bitcoin Cash is at 7. The difference is basically $1.5 billion. So yeah, I would definitely see them playing some hash games with this and trying to say, let's signal for IFP just to cause some havoc. But again, all that has to happen is more majority hash power needs to go to BCHN, and then next thing you know, as soon as a certain checkpoint rolls off, that Bitcoin ABC code base is like basically a fork at that point. So it all really comes down to who has the money to throw at this. I don't know. Do you think who's richer, Roger or like Calvin? Probably Calvin, right? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, so I guess that's how you know. Is like if BSV people are gonna mess with this, it depends on if it's Calvin or not. If it's Calvin, it probably lasts for a week or two because he's probably lost enough money recently. But I mean, like long term, I don't see Bitcoin Cash steering out away from what Bitcoin.com or other various contributors want like that. And as big as Vin and as big as some of these guys are, especially the lead developer in Bitcoin ABC group, like they've lost a lot of team members lately. They had a team that did not agree with this, and those people quit. So it's what's left is the people that do agree. So the Bitcoin ABC that you're thinking of right this second is not the same Bitcoin ABC that's been thought of for the last couple of years. It's just a couple guys left right now, and I think some of them are just doing it because they don't want to just give up. They don't necessarily agree or disagree. They just are going along for the ride. So I don't see them necessarily causing a big stir and not getting their way. But I do see Amari maybe trying to hold out to the last minute, and then get as much as he can get. But I know he did say that $200 million thing that Roger funded and stuff, it's very like hard to get and fishy like terms of a funding mechanism. Like if we were to build a product for Bitcoin Cash, we probably would have to sell it to them to get that funding, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff, right? So I think I could see how he would want some sort of decentralized, well, maybe not, some sort of crypto funding, but I think it needs to be decentralized. I don't think that he should have access to this amount of money. Just to, summarize one more time, it's too much money for one person to be trusted with. And even if he does have some sort of security layers there, it's not enough, and it needs to be distributed as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, did you have any questions?
I'm just trying to keep up. I guess I do. So you're saying that currently the way that the Bitcoin Cash is funded is through donations. They don't have any other okay. So then how is it just the fact that they're changing it to being where it's pulling away from a block reward? Like let's say it was like 1% versus 8%. Would that make a difference to you and how you feel about this? And I guess failing that, how would you, or if you even have any suggestions for how
if you were
to be able to go forth?
No, I got you.
Taking block rewards.
No, 100%. I thought about this a lot. So like there's two me's here in this conversation. There's the me that is a Bitcoin Cash fan. There's the me that's an early Bitcoin adopter that understands the liberties and the things that we appreciated about Bitcoin early on that may or may not exist in this industry right now. And that's okay, I think. But I still want them back, right? So for me to go and essentially, in my opinion, let one of my favorite long-term, I don't even have a lot of, I have like maybe a half a Bitcoin Cash right now because it's just like I'm not confident lately in them, right? And I love the project. I follow it. I most of the people that are involved, I'm very well tapped into what they're doing, but like that's one me. That's one me. The other me is the Dvault me, the one that has done this exact thing that they are trying to do right now. I didn't code into this, just to reference one more time, but we as a team have taken Bitcoin Cash. We've started over from a zero genesis block where we've added things like cold rewards, like new mechanisms to the code base. We've kept up with Bitcoin ABC while we're doing all this. We've basically forked so many different Bitcoin Cash projects, like we call it Dvault ID, but there's like a short, simple name system. Like a lot of stuff. We've kept up with that community. We've tried to be part of the Bitcoin Cash community. So that's the other me. And I think there's two different answers to that. One me says, okay, I understand what they're doing. I understand why they're doing it. I understand what their desires are in terms of funding. I understand why $200 million, and I understand why a donation model, and I understand why Flipstarter is not enough. I understand all of those things. But even though I understand all the stuff you guys are preaching, I cannot agree to the way you are telling me to fix it, that we can fix it, right? I cannot agree to the centralization of the funding. I cannot agree to the 8% block reward of a multi-billion-dollar project. I cannot agree to, you know what I mean? There's lots of details that could be altered, and my opinion gets a little bit better each time of what they're trying to do. And there's already a basis there for me to tend to agree with them, right? But everything that they've done beyond the saying we need money has been horrible. They've set a bad standard for themselves. They've come out swinging at people they don't need to be swinging at. They've called people like Russian agents and all this kind of crazy stuff. I've been banned from a couple channels for supporting the anti-IFP early stuff, right? And then it's like it had to become a movement for them to stop and listen. And I don't think that's the way these things need to go. I think they need to have an open ear all the time. They need to know, why people are saying this or that instead of just saying, you're wrong, we're smarter, we're rich, we're developers, because that's kind of what they act like, to be honest. Amari's not known to defend himself with reasoning. He's just known to kind of throw conjectures out there and little ad hominems and just little things like that. And you can go read all this for yourself, and it's all over the internet. But at the end of the day, I would agree that they need money. I would agree donations aren't the way to go. And I agree that there is a model that maybe down the road Bitcoin Cash can adopt. But I will stop and say this ain't the way. There is a better testing route we can go. There are other ways we can go to put a sort of crutch in there so we don't need funding right away. We can get some funding done right now. We could prioritize things. He can put public proposals. He can use a distributed fund. They could do a lot of things that they just don't care to even entertain. And then they'll go around and say things like, oh, this is the groundbreaking design. It's like, okay, are you bullshitting yourself or are you trying to bullshit me? Because that's what it sounds like at the end of the day. It's like you cut all these corners and then you're going to preach how amazing it is? Like, no. Back to the drawing board, please, right? And like I said earlier, if a $200,000 market cap coin numbered 1,000 to 180 or whatever can give some standards that are way above what a $4.3 billion project is doing, maybe there's a conversation to be had about what's the right way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely agree that, whatever sort of parameters were set when a project gets started, you kind of got to stick with that because it's, when people are, buying into a project or whatever, then, you want to know that it's, because even if it's voting up front, then, hey, at least it has the potential to change that way or however you do it. So.
Yeah, and I think part of the investment that people make in Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, because these are very still similar projects, is that they don't expect a lot to change. They expect it to fundamentally be similar down the road. And I think when you start diverting funds and you open up the door to say, hey, nothing's secret anymore. And like I said earlier, you could do that on altcoin. You don't have to be sacred on an altcoin. But when there's billions of dollars at stake and a lot of people involved that have been around for a lot of years, putting a lot of time into this, ramming stuff into people's throats and telling them, hey, we're in charge, is probably the way you get yourself kicked out.
Yeah, like maybe this is, my bad for not, being, more on top of, my money. But like, yeah, I don't necessarily want to have to keep up with politics, quite so intently to figure out, how I want to, what coin I want to hold on to.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
It's kind of unfortunate that there is that sort of, the drama that seems to go on sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's why voting is important. And again, I'm not going to go back to Dvault a whole bunch here, but like there's a lot of conversations that started out with what could make Bitcoin Cash better, and then we ended up with what we thought was a better version of Bitcoin Cash. And we're not going to go out and say, oh, we're better than Bitcoin Cash all day long, because like the money has to prove that, right? But we can say like, hey, look, we have some great ideas, and it's like the stuff you guys are trying to do, and all you got to do is understand why we did it this way. And maybe these people don't understand it because they haven't been in the altcoin scene long enough. Maybe they think they're and I've actually said this a lot. Bitcoin Cash people are secretly worse than Bitcoin maximalists like half the time. They can like way worse. Like it's so bad sometimes, dude. And it's just like, what the, oh my God, we're broken. So those people, let them be that way. It's fine, whatever. But like you said, you don't want to keep up with stuff. You just got to have a good protocol. You don't got to worry about all this fluff and all this drama, all this like politics behind the scenes, who's developing, who got fired. Like it should just have a way to keep itself together. Like forks are cool, but forks should not affect the coin it's forking from. Forks should be like a new way to do something. It should be a new science project. It should be something that you think, okay, I can do this, but if I do this on Bitcoin Cash, it's going to take me 3 years of politicking to get it done. I might as well just start the project fresh and show that it works, right? That's the point of altcoins. That's why forking is like a feature of Bitcoin still. And people don't know what I mean when I say that. But like Bitcoin is literally every single coin on CoinMarketCap, in my opinion. Like Bitcoin is not Bitcoin, the number one coin. Bitcoin is not Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV and Bitcoin. I think that's just short-sighted. Like again, short-sightedness. Like Bitcoin was the first of all these cryptocurrencies, and now we have all these cryptocurrencies, and they all do very similar things, but some of them do new things, and some of them will get baked into Bitcoin later on. So in my opinion, this is all just a big science project of how to make Bitcoin better, right? Like who says down the road, oh, we don't have a virtual machine on Bitcoin and perfect user experience, and it's sort of centralized, but it's federated, and all these cool things you can do with all these other currencies can be built into Bitcoin later on, but only if we have a way to keep the chains, adopting each other and working together and like not forking off and killing each other off, but instead like absorbing each other sometimes and going back together. And like I think that's what people forget about, is that's still Bitcoin. Like all of that is a feature of Bitcoin. So let Bitcoin Cash fork. Who really cares at the end of the day? There will be another coin that takes number 7. There will be another coin that focuses on low fees, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll be sad to see, coins use another feather coin or something like that. But it's just part of the process at the end of the day. So, if it happens, it happens. We learn from it and we continue going forward. But I will say that like people disregard all these altcoins as like useless scams, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like all these altcoins are a test bed for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was designed with the creation of test beds in mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
yeah, and like I said, they have different features. So you might want a different coin for a different reason too. So I definitely see there being a reason and a market for multiple options.
But yeah, I guess I got a little carried away with that one. But my point is like it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Forks like, but the problem is like there's not a coin yet that makes that person that doesn't want to follow everything day to day, month to month. I just had a friend actually text me the other day and say, hey, I saw CryptoBridge shut down, and I'm thinking, man, they shut down last year. And he's like, yeah, I got some coins in there. And I'm like, well, you don't anymore. Like, where you been, man? Like, it's been a year, So like, I think that those people need to be, cared for as well. And then, and people like Amari who push these changes that are going to cause those folks to basically lose their access to their coins or have to do another split or whatever else, I think that should be avoided when necessary. And if we could avoid that, the easiest way to avoid it is with a good governance model. So again, I see what Bitcoin Cash is trying to do, but a foundation is not the way. They need to learn from their peers, and I think we'll all be happy at that point, right?
Yeah, and what do you think is going to happen to the market cap? I mean, it has to, like, if there's a split, it has to go down, right? So
not necessarily. What happens if there's no split? What happens if they get to saying there's a split, and then that split coin just dies off instantly, and that just proves Bitcoin Cash is more like Bitcoin or something, right? Or whatever people think. You know how people are in this industry; they just kind of make up some reasoning. But like Bitcoin Cash, I think 4.4 billion. And I'm not going to get into all the reasons I think the market caps aren't necessarily unrealistic, but I think that's kind of where it's going to stay based on the whales and based on the holders that are involved. Maybe we shave off 300,000, whatever, based on some guy dumping that he's unhappy. But the thing is this whole industry is basically based off of whales that are in early, and then they're trying to support these coins long term so that they can not only exit but create more wealth on top of their wealth that they've already created. And so I think that the billions of dollars you see in these market caps is basically a whale counter, right? So if there's 5 or 12 or 15 whales that have 10, 5, 3% of Bitcoin Cash market cap, it's going to be pretty stable. But the more distributed that is, the more stable theoretically it should be. Let's say though Roger decides, oh, I'm not getting my way, I'm going to tank the price for a little while, or somebody else decides, oh, maybe let's say, how about this? Maybe Roger wants more coins, and the price drops for just a moment, and then Roger drops, $500,000 on the market. Boom, market cap goes up $1 billion, and he drops $500,000. Like that's the way it works. Like if CoinMarketCap is going to just do some math, and the market cap is going to go up, but it's not really $500 million coming into the space. It's like 10 mil. The order books got cleared, whatever, right? It's not necessarily like that much mark. So in my opinion, market cap doesn't matter. It'll stay at number 7, number 6, number 8, somewhere in there. And that's only because there is a cartel of people in this industry that keep these things in place for the most part. And I don't see this tiny fuss breaking up that cartel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Was there anything you wanted to go over that we haven't gone over yet?
No, man, I appreciate the chat about this. This is fun. I've been talking a lot of crap on Twitter lately. Like about just how this isn't right, that's not right, kind of making fun of people, tongue in cheeks type stuff. But I do care about this. Like as much as I don't have a lot of coins outside of Dvault lately, I've been following Bitcoin Cash since the early days, and it's always fun to talk about it. It's a little fresh, something new to talk about other than Dvault all day long. So anytime, I'm happy to discuss any sort of crypto stuff you guys want to talk about. Just, expect me to rant a little bit.
You should be like our permanent crypto consultant or something, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm down.
He's already our most frequent guest, so
love it. Yeah, I've been thinking about, like if I could find the time in the organization and space in my mind to do some sort of content production, I would love to do it myself. It's just that keeping a schedule and all that I do enough of that already, and I just don't want to add to it.
Cool, man. Yeah, we'll have you on whenever you want. So just hit me up.
Sweet. Yeah, man. But yeah, any I guess any other little things you want to discuss about that at all? Because I'm happy to keep going. I know you guys chop it up a little bit. You don't have to use all this crap. I speak a lot, so.
Can't think of any other questions. I mean, well, besides philosophically,
how about this?
Philosophically, I'd say since the coin didn't start out with being taking block rewards automatically. Yeah. Everyone's kind of being, forced to, I guess Bitcoin ABC wants to force everybody to, go this way that people may or may not want to go, and they're forcing the miners. So, to me, it's kind of like I don't want to say tax, but.
No, it's a tax. This is one of the original arguments: is it a tax or is it not a tax? And if you're a miner or anybody who doesn't get funding, it's a tax. That's just the way it is. It's inflation going directly to the team. So I don't know, call it what you want, but it ain't going to the people that it was going to before.
Right.
Tax or no taxes, it's the same format,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as a Agorist, I'm kind of I'm pretty much against that. It's No,
I could taxes.
Yeah. But if there's a coin that starts out with it, I don't really think it's as bad, because it's well, you're kind of consenting to it because you're buying into it, or as a miner you knew that's what you were
or with the Dash master nodes, that Dash didn't have funding protocol at first. Dash just had a Dash, and it was just a dark coin, right? And then next thing you know, they added by the way, Otto, the guy that owns Blockfolio and stuff like that just sold it, he's the guy that invented the funding mechanisms that we all use today, basically, because he went to Evan and said, hey Evan, why don't we take some of these coins to pay master nodes, and then some of these coins to pay the developers, and then Evan was like, cool, sounds good. And next thing you know, we all have these treasury models that we use by accident, basically. And so Darkcoin didn't even have it back in the day. When they were Dash, they finally had it. But the thing is they had a masternode quorum system that everyone knew about ahead of time for the most part. And it was early days where everyone didn't know what was going on. So now we have all these open standards for the most part on how to do things on cryptocurrencies. There's plenty of coins to fork. There's plenty of code bases to take inspiration from. Yet like I said, they didn't even do any of that. They just kind of said, well, we're going to do it the easiest, cheapest way possible and with the least oversight. And if anything legally happens to the money, then oopsie whoopsie, sorry guys. Like, no, that's not how we're doing this. So I think that's the main thing too. It's just like, yeah, taking it and adding it later on is bad. But if there's a vote, if there was a clean way to take hash power vote, I would totally be okay with that being the way that we decide whether or not to add IFP, right? But because hash power is so cluttered and broken for an actual governance mechanism of the space, because so many coins use SHA that are bigger than Bitcoin Cash, or I mean Bitcoin does and Bitcoin SV do. So the overall pool of SHA hash is just not very useful for a governance mechanism as opposed to just a profit pool of people mining. So let's say we all and this would be even just as crazy for, let's say Bitcoin ABC did this. They said, hey, we want to do one coin, one vote. Everyone in Bitcoin Cash would freak out. And I get it, right? That's why we didn't go to the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem and try to push our ways on people, because I've been through that. I was in Dash early when I tried to push my ways on them. And I was like, hey, we need to do this. I think this is better. This is better. That's better. And it's just waste of energy, right? And then long term, PivX, Smart Cash, all these type of things. Same idea. I'm doing my thing. I'm pushing my opinions. I'm pushing my ways I think we can do things better, all this kind of stuff. It's just easier to start a coin. It just is. You know what I mean? So I don't know why these guys haven't learned that lesson yet. Maybe they're still a little bit further behind in that area of development in the space, but they could just start a coin as a hobby project, still work on Bitcoin Cash, start an altcoin, say, hey, we're starting this altcoin because we want to prove this funding mechanism works. If you want to invest into Bitcoin ABC, buy this coin. Voila, problem solved, right? No, because they want Bitcoin Cash. So I don't know. That's just kind of
that's a good point though. Yeah, it would be easier for them to be like, okay, we want to prove that this works and we want to, test it out and make different adjustments, and fine tune.
But they're just trying to get the money and get it now.
yeah.
It's crazy.
For sure. Well, I think that's going to be a wrap today. Thank you so much for coming on, Decentralizd.
Yeah, dude. Thanks, even.
Yeah, and as always, thanks, Dag. Appreciate you as a co-host for sure. So
I'm looking at my Bitcoin.com pin on my desk I just found, and it says, free the market, free the world. It's a good closing statement.
Free the market, free the rails. Hell yeah. I'm down for that. But that's our show today. Agorist Nexus out.